Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay. So I'm going to start by asking you to please tell us your name and share anything you want with us to help us get to know you a little bit better.
My name's Kevin Smith. I'm head of IT and facilities for a school at one of the top universities in the country. Live about 30 miles from the school. Have a wife and 3 children, all teenagers.
Wow.
Yeah, they're all officially teenagers now. Not too bad. Everything is going pretty good. I'm just trying to get the oldest one motivated to be a little. He doesn't understand that his summer needs to be more productive now. That he's 16 and looking at college and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes perfectly good sense. But I watched something this morning on the news that said more of the Gen Zs are moving back in with their parents than have been ever before. So they may not leave you ever.
I think that'd be okay with my wife, at least for a little while. But yeah, I can't imagine my oldest one wanting to come back with us just because he doesn't know what he wants to do, but he's already realizing the grad school may be a part of his process. So,
yeah, that's very good. So, this is a diversity chat, so I want to ask you a couple of questions. When you hear the words Black Lives Matter, what do you think?
I think definitely before the death of George Floyd, I didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that I participated in, some of the conversations I participated in through the Diversify IT group that you helped start really has helped open my eyes about that. Now I see it as saying the Black people in America feel that their lives don't matter, especially to law enforcement and some other other parts of society, if not all society, and that Black Lives Matter is a statement saying, yes, we do matter. I think that a lot of people don't understand that right now, and that's where the response, all lives matter, comes back from people that don't understand that why that statement, that Black Lives Matter, is an important statement.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So you said that you didn't really think about this before Mr. Floyd was killed, but so did you see, in your mind, was all people the same? In other words, did you think Black and brown people had the same opportunities as you did as a white man? Do you think that, like this is hyperbole or something that's happening right in this moment? Or, is this something that's, something that's not, as a non-issue? So, like a lot of white people have said to me, I didn't have any slaves. My ancestors might have had slaves, but I didn't have any. So why are you asking me about this? Or I'm not a racist, or whatever it is. I mean, when you hear those kind of things, what goes to your mind? I mean, do you think that Black and brown people are on par with white people, specifically white men?
No, I don't think that I've had that feeling. I've seen the things on the news about, or I guess the new shows like 2020, where they have a resume with the exact same credentials, but it's a Black sounding name versus a white sounding name, about callbacks and things like that. So I understand, I think I understood that part of it, but I did not understand the interactions with police, how that would happen to people regularly, and just because the color of their skin. I think I was blind to that fact and didn't understand it until I heard people say it. It was in those conversations, and really understood that, yes, this is not this only happens to bad people. This only happens to criminals. It happens to everyone. I think reading and listening and talking has has helped me understand that it is a problem, and it is not, if you hear people talk about with their young children that they have to have a conversation about how they have to interact with police if they're Black. That's never crossed my mind.
No.
My son is he hasn't driven by himself yet, but even, preparing to get his license, that's so foreign to me that conversation has to occur for their safety.
And I think the thing that also is out there is economic, environmental, and health justice too, or injustices, I should say, because what we have learned over time is like for the predominantly white community, you leave your children, your family, a legacy, right? You have a house, you have, assets, stocks, and all these things. And so when you're moving on to your next transition in life, dead, you leave your kids something, right? You leave your kids something. So for a lot of Black and brown communities, and when I define brown, I mean, brown is kind of universal, but I heard that they're, yellow, which that sounds so strange to me, but for me, the classification of Black and brown really means anyone who is marginalized one way or the other, not necessarily skin tone, but like your lot in life, like with this pandemic, so Hispanic and Latin American people are more likely to become susceptible to it, and I don't know why that is. Black people are, because of chronic health conditions that have been transferred from them from generation to generation. I mean, so where in the sense of the injustices that exist for Black and brown people do you think this should go, or do you think this is something that is just we're making progress every year?
I don't know if I understand exactly what you're asking for.
So, okay, let me see if I can give you an example.
Okay.
So, there was a story on the news last night about Hispanic people who are undocumented, who are working in these essential jobs, right? So not just healthcare, but you got to cut the grass, you got to do whatever it is that they're doing, so they're undocumented. And so they can't stop working because they get the virus, because then they're not qualified to get the $600 unemployment benefit. They're not qualified to get all these other things. So literally they become vulnerable economically, they become vulnerable health-wise, they become vulnerable, in all the different things. So that's something that the Black community has dealt with for almost 400 years, so do you think that where we are in 2020, we've made progress? Have we moved? Are we making strides to bring wealth equality, environmental justice, health justice, justices to communities that have been not necessarily represented in those spaces?
I think that the conversations that have started have helped a lot of white people like myself to understand a little bit better, to not close off. But it's amazing to see in social media people that I went to high school with have dug in their heels the other way. Like you said, I've seen somebody post, I didn't own slaves, or my parents or grandparents don't own slaves, and you weren't a slave, I don't owe you anything, kind of thing. And that's not the case. If you listen to, even like some podcasts I listen to about economics have talked about the issue with, like you said, the generational wealth, that for white Americans, there's a huge disparity. I mean, it's a huge disparity. And they gave an example of after World War II that they had a housing development geared toward veterans, and it wasn't in the South. I think it was in Long Island or Staten Island or something like that. And the bank put in there that Black people were not allowed to own a house in that development, and those houses have gone from being less than $100,000 in value to $500,000 in value. And that, Black people were kept out of that. That was a generational wealth building opportunity that Black people were explicitly kept out of. And it wasn't just a racist developer. It was the government institution that backed them.
Yep.
For
redlining still exists today. And a lot of it is like, so we're looking at where I live, gentrification is happening everywhere in neighborhoods that have been predominantly Black, had a crack epidemic and all that stuff. People who own those houses are being offered some nominal sum of money to give up their property. So they don't have very much to begin with, but somebody comes along and says, hey, I'll give you $50,000, $100,000 for your house, and you sell it, and you can't get back in that space again, right? So you can't get back because the prices are going up exponentially and you can't afford to buy back, so that $50,000 or $100,000 is going to go quickly and you're not going to get that wealth back again. And I think that one of the most important things that have come out of these recent protests and all that stuff is how great the divide is on these topics of race, gender, ethnicity, wealth, health, environment, so and I think it was Richmond, Virginia, but I don't remember where it was right now. There was a big thing that happened about in the late 70s with garbage dumps, so dump sites. They put dump sites near Black places where were more predominantly Black and poor communities, as opposed to putting it where it was more convenient or better for anybody. But they wanted to put it in this community. And another example you can look at is the team that Stephon Curry plays for is moving out of Oakland and moving to a high rent district, right? So, these are the kind of things that actually push the economic or the wealth equality further back, and then there's the piece of education, right? So, how many Black men are in jail compared to how many are in college? These are the kind of things that are there. And I mean, when you talk about your wife and your children, a lot of Black families don't have a whole family, the father's missing, the mother's missing, or whatever, and so it's kind of like pieces of things that happen to us all the time that seem to hold us back from ever reaching our economic equalities, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you see that? Do you see that that's something that's going to get better? Do you see that, something needs to change? And I guess I'm kind of hinting around about reparations, right? Because that's what everybody's talking about today. So how do you do that?
I think that there has to be something to make it, to force the change. I don't think it is not going to just change. Like I said, that there has to be something that catches Black people up to where they should be from where they are now, because of the I just finished a book, the book, not new book, but the book on Grant, and he was served as of course Lincoln was assassinated in his first year of his second term, and then Johnson took over and basically tried to roll everything Lincoln had done back. Yeah. And it was they basically some people considered the immediate time after the Civil War to be worse than slavery. Yeah. Because they were instead of the what Lincoln wanted to do and Grant wanted to do, Johnson did everything he could to appease the white Southern rich that had been in power and wanted to return to power. Yep. And it really, instead of giving these newly freed people education and opportunity, they stripped everything from them and made it a worse experience. So, and like you said, redlining and other things that have happened since then, it's not possible, to catch everybody up. Just say, oh, well, you've got the same opportunities, the same free education. Not really. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that one of the other problems, and I've heard a lot in my diversity chats with other folks, is even when you get an opportunity to participate in the white culture, if you will, go to a predominantly white college, live in a diverse neighborhood or whatever it is, there's this thing about, well, do you really belong there, right? So, you know, are you smart enough to go to this university, or do you have the resources, or you're just here because of affirmative action? And so I think that there are so many things that kind of are off balance. And so even catching Black people up, I don't even know what that means, because I mean, like, how do you go back 400 years and catch us up? You know, we were denied education, couldn't buy property. You know, we built all these ghettos in big cities. How is that done? I mean, what is the policies and laws that has to change to even make something like that possible?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the the biggest thing coming out of the death of George Floyd is the people understand now that you can't just sit on the sidelines, and being a nice person is not good enough anymore. You've got to be an advocate, an ally, and help make that change. You know, that's how I felt. Oh, I'm a good person. I'm not doing anything wrong, but I wasn't doing anything right and anything helpful. So I've been very proud of seeing a lot of people that I know be out there and be active and try to help. But but I've been also incredibly disheartened about people that, like I said, dig in and put false information out there and just don't want to listen. They don't care to listen. They don't, you know, you know, it's just amazing that what did you know, I think Roger Goodell, commissioner of the NFL, made a statement, and people have said, okay, we're done with the NFL. I was like, what? You know, how is that possible? You know, he wants to, you know, do the right thing and be helpful, and you're done. You're you know, it's some of the things some of the things I see and hear is just amazing to me. How, you know, I've seen pictures of, you know, the first Black girl to go to a school.
Right.
I can't remember what school it was, but you saw these angry white faces in the picture. And that's what some of these social media comments make me think of, you know?
I think, you know, I grew up in South Carolina, in a rural part of South Carolina. And when Facebook came along, one of the things that they were always offering was class reunions, so you could find people who you went to school with. And so I found most of my class. And shortly after that, I quit Facebook because I just could not take the number of racist and, you know, insensitive comments that people would make, you know, to use the N word with no care, like, no, you know, that word is a painful word for Black people, you know. And, you know, people try to equate it to other things, but I mean, like, if you're a grown man and someone refers to you as a boy, there's something about that that's so hurtful that you can't process it. Or the injustices that happens in the workplace, you know. So as we were talking about the people who are having to work now and they're undocumented or whatever it is. And I think it's unique in that instance to Hispanic people, but for Black people, that's the same case. You know, you've got to go and, you know, clean the hospital, and you've got to go and clean the office, you know, and you look around you and everybody who's cooking or cleaning is Black or brown, period. That's all that it is. And so as a society, if we don't recognize and see that, I'm not exactly sure how we even get from here where we are. You know, I mean, if that doesn't bother you, you know, that you walk in your office and all the people that clean your building are Black or brown, and that doesn't just do something to your brain to say, why is that the case? You know, then it's one of those things where, you know, we as a society may be doomed to keep this going on for a long time. And the Holocaust is a perfect example of that. You know, they have made it so important that that time not be repeated again, that we don't have another Holocaust. But slavery and those things, we're still recovering. You know, 400 years later, we're still recovering. And I think it's really important that people like you and others are having these conversations, challenging the status quo, right? If somebody says, that in over there, that you're not just going to swallow it and say, well, that didn't feel good to me, but I'm not going to say anything to that person. That you stand up, for that and say, hey, we need to change that. So one of the things you also mentioned about was having the conversation with your children, and you said your son is not driving yet. So I had this conversation with somebody not too long ago about, what happens when you see the blue lights that pull up behind you. And most white people say, oh my God, I'm going to get a ticket. How fast was I going? What have I done? How am I going to pay this? How am I going to get out of this? Whatever it is. And in some communities, that's not enough. Like when those blue lights pull up behind you, you got to have this conversation with a child over and over and over and over again, like put your hands on the steering wheel, do everything they tell you to do, and you still might die. You still might die. A famous tennis player was beat up in New York City by the police. I mean, because he looked like an ordinary black guy when he was really a celebrity or something or another. I mean, like, there's something about the society that just seems like we are doomed to keep repeating this and keep Black people where they are, keep them in their place.
Yeah, it's, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't understand how things, why that happens, because you saw the video of the man who was killed by the police at the Wendy's in Atlanta.
Yep.
How did that escalate? It just makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, some of the footage from the beginning of the interaction seemed very cordial and everything, and then all of a sudden, how many minutes later he's shooting him?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And then the young man in where did that happen? That came up recently after that, where he was wearing a hoodie, and because he was cold. He told him, I'm anemic or something like that, so I'm cold. That's why I have my hoodie on, and it escalated to his death. That makes no sense. How does that happen?
Because I think we as a society have not really come to a place where we see race equally, right? Mm-hmm. So you have an advantage because you are a white man. So going in the gate, you get a pass for all the things that you do in a way that I would not. So I wrote a paper not too long ago on social capital, right? And social capital where, you can make a recommendation, hey, tell your friend or your coworker or something, I think you ought to hire this person. And they say, okay. And the person turns out to be a total bust, just a slacker. You're just not good at all. And you get another chance to do that. Whereas if I do that and that person didn't turn out well, it has repercussions to my capital. So I can't use that again. I may not be able to go back to that same well and say, hey, well, I have another person I think you should consider. Or I have another person I'd like you to, mentor or coach, because my capital is much less than your capital, So mm-hmm. in our society, I don't know how we ever get past that. I don't know how we get on even footing. I don't know how we get to the place where we are in sync about what should happen for our differences. And it's really, I think, people like you, I think it's going to take white people to actually get on board and see this as a cause worth fighting for. Mm-hmm. And if you're talking about Lincoln and Grant, you and I really are akin because I had just finished reading the same book. And the History Channel did a documentary on Grant and, his original upbringing and all that stuff, and he was so entrenched in his beliefs that he just would not, move away from it. And I think that made him a great leader for that period of time. But if you look at it holistically, yeah, not really, it's just, and all of the leaders are that way from that time. And so when you come to where we are now, and, so we've got a pandemic, we've got, these police killings and police abuse, people talking about defund the police. I think that's a ludicrous idea to defund the police. Train the police, educate the police, have, you know, a social worker or some other kind of person riding with the police to these events so they can de-escalate it. As opposed, we need the police. We need people that will keep law and order. But law and order has to be fair. It cannot be, well, you're black and, you know, you must be doing something wrong. Why are you in this neighborhood? So I'm sure you saw the young black man who's jogging. He ran through new construction and they, you know, shot him because, you know, he didn't look like he belonged there. I mean, like, there's something about that. It just flies in the face of reason. You know, these are human beings.
Yeah. I mean, I told my wife I've done that before. I've seen a house under construction and went in and peeked around just to see what the layout would be and everything like that. And I'm going to die because of that. You know, it's,
die,
but I mean, that's, person died because of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those are the kind of things, like, I think what the 20th and 21st century has given us, the late half of 20th century, is the ability to record these things now. So everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got something, and they're documented. And then on top of all of that, then you've got all the cameras that the government, the city, and the towns put in place. So everything is now captured, you know, and then the story is either spun to the right or spun to the left, you know, whatever the media wants to portray this as, right? So, you know, one of the reasons why I think that this COVID thing has gotten so far out of hand is you've got two opposing forces pulling at each other in different directions, right? So you've got the media saying this, and you've got politicians saying the other. And so you have these two forces. So what's the story that's really told? And the truth is lost in there somewhere. So, you know, I think that for our society, a lot of this has to be that we need partners. We need people to have relationships with us. Need people to see us as human, right? So if you saw a black person walking down your street, you wouldn't think, oh my God, they're coming to rob me, or they're coming to, you know, do something to me, you know. It's just those things that just really, you know, are jarring, right? So they just happen and they kind of dislodge you from where you thought you were and where you really are. Yeah.
I think a big problem is a lot of people have a hard time putting themselves in other people's shoes and trying to see something from their vantage point. I think I told you about, we had a Confederate statue in my town for the longest time, and we had a new group of county commissioners come in, and one of the first things they did was they voted and they took it down. And they should have taken it down quickly, but there were protests, and I mean, every single weekend there were people on both sides of the street protesting and counter protesting and everything like that. And my wife was like, well, it's just history. What's the big deal? It's just a statue. Statue doesn't bother anybody. It's like, well, just think about it. If you were, instead of being an immigrant, a Korean immigrant to this country, if you were a black woman and every day you had to see a soldier who fought, you know, basically for slavery, to keep slavery intact, how would that make you feel every single day? And my wife was like, oh, okay, I understand. I wouldn't want to see that. So people just can't put themselves in other people's shoes, or they don't want to. You know, the Colin Kaepernick, and I admit I didn't understand, you know, when it first happened, when he was in the league and he kneeled, I didn't understand. Now I understand. You know, people are getting all upset again and saying, oh, I won't watch the NFL and I won't do this, and you know, oh, it's about the, you know, he's against the military and everything like that. The military doesn't own the American flag. The military, you know, defends the flag, but, you know, he's not doing anything against the military. He is taking an opportunity to, you know, bring recognition to a cause that needs some people to look at it. And how do you do that? You don't, you know, if you don't protest by making things easy. You protest by, you know, being in the middle of something and making things uncomfortable for people. And that's what he did. And some people still can't see that, still say, oh, he's, you know, against the military. So no, he took a very brave stand. He gave up, you know, basically he sacrificed his career to make a statement. And if people can't put themselves in that, can't look at it from that side of view instead of saying, oh, he's against my flag and so I'm against him, then, you know, we've got to make people understand that there's more than one point of view to everything. You know, they've got to sit there and say, well, you know, what is he trying to do? What's he trying to say? Not just, oh, I don't like that, and so I'm against him.
Yeah. And I think the interesting piece of that is that, you know, we are often penalized for our attempts to establish equality, establish, you know, ethical responses to our processes and our thoughts and our homes and our lives and our families, you know. So, you know, back in the Olympics, the German Olympics, I don't know if you remember, there's a picture of the three black men holding up the fist, you know, they were you know, all of those things have been said to be counter to a democratic society, you know, like, so kneeling, you know, not putting your hand on your chest when you say the Pledge of Allegiance, or prayer, you know, and all of these things have been used to paint a picture of what it is to be black and brown. We're just bad people, you know. So when there was all that talk about the border wall going up between Mexico and the United States, you know, there was, you know, rhetoric out there that, you know, they're rapists and murderers. Every single race on the planet have rapists and murderers out there. It's not like this is no unique to this group. Every group has, you know. But the way it's painted in the space that we live in, it's like the brown people and the black people are the bad people. These are the bad. These people you need to worry about. And I think that that's an unfair portrayal, but I think that's what allows people to dig their heels in, right? So, you know, I've been told for so long that it is bad to be black. It is bad to be brown. It is bad to be a woman. I'm an angry black woman. I'm a violent black woman. I'm this, I'm that, and that, and that, and that. And then at the end of the day, here we are. You know, we got to change the narrative. The narrative must be changed because I can't remember who wrote this, it leaves my mind, but when they came for me, there was no one else there, because eventually you're going to run out of people to malign, right? So
Yeah.
you got to stand with them as opposed to standing behind and watch it happen and say, oh, well, you know, yeah, I agree. He shouldn't be kneeling at when they're singing, when the flag is raised, or when they're singing the national anthem. I mean, I know white people that are atheists and don't like anything American. You know, they want to overthrow the government. They want to, you know, militarize, you know, their groups. What's the difference? How you make a distinction between that group and another group for actually just expressing their views?
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, this is really great. We have about 3 minutes. I'm leaving you all the time to you. Anything you want to add?
Well, I appreciate the conversation, and it's always good to hear your insight. I would just encourage people to watch this to not just sit on the sideline and think that they're a good person, you know. And we've got to help. We've got to be active. We've got to, you know, stand for what's right and not just say, well, as long as I'm not actively doing something wrong, I'm good. That doesn't help. We've seen that for a long time, that's not good enough.
Absolutely. And it's always great to talk to you. I don't get to talk to you or see you as much. We're not in the same space anymore. Plus we're sheltering in place mostly. So, but I'm sure I'll get to see you again soon.
Yeah, I owe you a lunch.
Yes, you do. And I think our favorite lunch places, they're struggling right now because they have, you know, like, you know, people go to lunch at noon or whatever, and they have business, you know, and then they have a little small shutdown. As I understand it, they don't even shut down anymore for that little break because they're trying to get all the business they can get, you know. And so I think it'll be really interesting what our economy looks like when we come back from this pandemic. And I mean, I know we'll come back. I mean, we had the Great Depression of 1920. We recovered from that. We had the recession in 2009. We recovered from that. I do think we will recover. It's just there'll be a different look to us. You know, we'll look different. We'll respond differently. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago about emerging technologies, replacing, McKinsey did the thing, The Future of Work. Have you read that?
Mm-mm.
It's a wonderful article talking about how maybe 60% of the work that human beings do can be replaced by machines or automation. So, I'll be very interested to see what our economy looks like and what our world looks like when we get on the other side of this. Because if I owned a business and I didn't have to shut down because I had workers, if I could, like say Walmart or Sam's or something like that, I can automate all these processes. I wouldn't be in the economic stress process that I'm in. So, that's a real thing. And it has implications for race and gender. So there's a lot to be said there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you so much for talking with me. I appreciate it. And when it's lunchtime again, we'll get together. Stay safe. And if I can help, please let me know.
All right. Take care, Rochelle.
And I'm going to send you a copy of this video when it's converted. And you can let me know if we can upload it or not.
All right. Will do.
Thank you, dear. Be
All
safe.
right. Take care. You too.